Hi guys, so if you want to see how I made this beautiful reversible dress, please just follow along. My initial plan when I first started making the dress was to have this plain colored dress with a beautiful vibrant patterned fabric as the lining. But as I was going along, I realized that the method I was using turned the dress reversible, which was a bonus really. So if you want to see how I accomplished that, just keep watching the video. To start with, I'm just tracing a previously made fitted bodice pattern onto fresh pattern paper. I'm going to use this to draw and cut out the pattern for the tube section of the dress. This is not a pattern making video, so I'm not going to go into this step by step of how I made the patterns, but I did want to show you what I did. So I'm just going to play it in like a time lapse or something so you can see. So these are the pattern pieces that I'm going to use for the tube section of the dress. I'm just going to label them like so that if I refer to them later on in the video, you would know which pieces I'm referring to. Right now I'm just aligning the side part of the side front and the side part of the back piece just to make sure they are the same length. As you can see, I've redrawn the tube top pieces with a 1/2 inch seam allowance all around it, except for the center front that has one side on the fold. For the decorative part at the top of the tube, I'm just measuring the length of the top of the pattern pieces. Then I'm going to use that to determine the length of the decorative piece. Since I'm using such a small piece of scrap paper for this pattern, I decided to divide it into two, 8 inches each. I didn't really have like a particular size in mind for the thickness, so I just kind of went with 1.5 inches with 1/2 inch of seam allowance on both sides. But if I could change my mind, I think I would have made it like a little bit thicker, so maybe 2.5 inches as opposed to the 1.5 inches that I went with. For the waist of the skirt front, I'm using a radius that I calculated from the waist measurement. just now adding a seam allowance and also cutting and drawing the pocket pieces. I used to have a hard time drawing front-facing pockets for the longest time, but I'm happy that I can actually confidently make a front-facing pocket right now. But yeah, it's actually a lot easier than it looks in this video. Right now I'm working on the back skirt piece. I actually forgot to add a seam allowance, a side seam allowance to the skirt pieces, but not to worry, I remembered when I was cutting and I added it then. So these are all the pattern pieces I need for this particular dress. Next is cutting. When cutting out the pattern, these two pieces need to be cut on the fold for the two part. That's important. I'm going to put the number of each of the pieces that I'm cutting on the screen. So I got a new rotary cutter and I was super excited to use it, as you can probably tell. But I'm not really sure if it's for me. I eventually had to swap back to scissors because it was a bit too fiddly for me. The skirt front piece has to be cut on a fold as well, but the back piece can be cut separately. So as you can see, I have my two front skirt pieces cut on a fold. One is in the main fabric and one is in the lining fabric. And for the back as well, I have my four pieces, two with the main fabric and two with the lining fabric. You can see the rest of the cut fabric. You can see the ones with the lining and the ones with the main fabric. I decided to use the main fabric for some of the pieces that would be the lining technically, just because I wanted to, but you can use the lining fabric for a lot of the inner parts. So I realized at this point that I had made pocket holes in the lining of the skirt front. At this point I wasn't planning on making a reversible dress, so the pocket holes were not required. But if you are making a reversible dress and you want to have pocket holes in the reverse side, then feel free to leave the pocket holes and just double the number of pocket pieces that you cut out basically. But yeah, so I'm just using scrap fabric to cover up the holes and just remove it basically, because I didn't plan to make pockets on the lining. Okay, now that that is done, I'm just going to try and cut out some fabric from the bottom of my lining fabric. So I'm pinning it all together, and then I'm going to basically take away about 1/4 of an inch from the bottom of the lining. I'm doing this so that the hemline is going to be a lot neater and then fold into the skirt as opposed to being exposed. I'm not sure if that makes any sense, but I will try and show you the end product when we get there. So I'm doing that for both the skirt front and the skirt back. So next I'm working on joining the tube pieces together. It was a bit difficult to see which was the front, like the wrong side, and which was the right side. So I just randomly decided on which part would be which. So I'm just joining them with the right sides facing each other, which means we are currently looking at the wrong sides. That is one of them done. I am now working on the second one. The reason we have two pieces is because one of them is technically the lining fabric, but I decided that I wanted to use the same fabric as the main one. But feel free to use your lining fabric, or if you're doing a two-sided dress, then using your second fabric. Onto the pockets. So right now I'm just aligning it like this to make sure I have the right pieces and everything is facing the correct way. The pocket lining should be facing up like that, with the right side facing up. Then I'm pinning the pocket back with the right sides facing each other. So the right side of the pocket back is facing the right side of the skirt front. And then I'm going to sew along that seam. Also doing it for the other side. Next thing I'm doing is taking the pocket lining and placing it with the right sides facing the pocket backing like so. Then I'm just gonna pin it all together along the sides. I'm then just going to fold it just to make sure I'm on the right side, and then I'm going to sew along the edge like so. Right now you can probably see why I used the lining fabric for the pocket lining, because I kind of wanted the design to show from the front of the pocket like so. At this point you should probably iron everything flat so that it stays in place. I'm also just pinning it so that it's not shifting while I'm working. Next, I'm just going to attach the front piece, the front skirt piece, to one of the back pieces. You have to make sure that the sides that you're aligning are the correct sides, so make sure they are the same length. Then you want to place the back piece on top of the front piece with the right sides facing each other. And then you're going to sew along the side, or I'm going to sew along the side anyway. You are going to do the same thing for the other side. Pin the pockets in place to prevent it from shifting, and then you can place the back piece on top of the front piece, making sure the lengths are aligned, and then pin it together so you can sew down the side. After that, I'm going to attach the main fabric tube to the main fabric skirt, if that makes sense. So making sure the right sides are facing each other when you pin. So right now we're looking at the wrong sides, but I'm pinning with the right sides facing each other. So this is the part that's going to be the main part of the dress. So everything I did with the front pieces, I'm going to do it with the back pieces. I'm joining the front skirt to the back skirt pieces. And then after that, I'm going to join the tube top part of the lining to the skirt part. So right now I'm just showing you what they kind of look like. So this is the main part, and then this is the lining part. Like I said, you can use a different fabric if you're going for a two-sided dress or just the lining fabric. For this piece, I'm just going to pin them together, and then I'm going to sew along this line. Remember to leave the back open. I actually made a mistake and sewed that bit together, and then I had to like take it out after. So the next part is to add the zipper. This was the first time I tried this method, and it was also the first time I ever used an invisible zip. So there was a lot of trial and error on my part, but basically just try and watch and see how I eventually added the zip. So remember how I said I did a lot of trial and error? Yes, this is one of the errors. I basically sewed the zip on the wrong side and I had to start again. I just wanted to show you that, there was a lot of trial and error. So after like my third try, I finally got one side of the zip into the dress. Honestly, it was very stressful, but I finally did it, and then I moved on to the second side. So at this point, I had gotten the zipper to kind of work, and to be honest, I kind of wish I had gone with like a regular zip because this was very stressful. I'm not going to lie. I think I just need a little bit more practice. Next thing I'm doing is trying to find the center point so that I can attach the decorative piece to the top of the tube. So I'm just nicking it a little bit at the top just so that I can align things at the center. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the decorative piece. I don't have a better name for it, I'm sorry. And then I'm just placing it on the right side of the main part of the dress, so the front of the dress. And I'm just pinning that all the way around to the back as far as it will go. Next thing I did, I turned the dress inside out, and then I'm placing the lining part of the tube, or the tube part of the lining, onto the tube part of the main fabric with the right sides facing each other. And then I'm just going to pin that in place and then sew around. Also, with the bottom of the dress, I'm just going to pin the skirt part with the right sides facing each other. I'm going to pin all the way around the bottom, and then I'm going to sew along that bottom hemline. So this is what it looks like after sewing. I haven't taken the pins out, but I'm going to do that in a minute. You should probably iron your fabric a lot more than I do while you're sewing. It just makes everything so much neater. And you don't really have to struggle as much as I am right now to align things. So going back to what I said earlier, remember when I cut some of the fabric off of the lining fabric? This was so that when you iron the dress, some of the main fabric goes into the inner part of the dress. It makes the hem a lot neater than if the lining and the skirt were like the same. At this point, all that is left is the opening under the zip that goes into the lining fabric. So turning the fabric inside out, we are going to sew the dress from underneath the zip, starting with the main fabric. So we're joining the main fabric together, and then we're sewing down all the way to the bottom of the dress, and then we are going to continue past that into the lining fabric. I wish I had shown this a lot better, but I didn't realize I was out of frame. We're going to go past the hem into the lining fabric, and you're going to keep going all the way to the zip, but you're going to have to leave like a little bit of a gap so that you can turn the dress back the correct way. So I'm not really sure how to explain it again, but basically you just sew from the main fabric all the way to the lining fabric, and then you leave a little bit of a gap underneath the zip. So this is what it looks like after sewing. It's like a big ball of just fabric. So through that hole underneath the zip, I'm just going to flip the entire thing the correct way. After flipping everything the correct way, you will see that everything is nice and closed and neat. All that's left right now is just that little hole underneath the zip in the lining or in the second fabric, depending on which one you're going for. So I'm just gonna hand stitch that closed. I'm sure you can also like maybe glue it closed, or maybe there's another way to close it, but I'm just gonna hand stitch and close that gap, and that's it. We are done with the dress. Really, that's it.